In the 1960s, Time magazine reported that a subcommittee of the United States Senate was assembled to discuss the topic of time management. The best experts in the field were concerned that with advances in technology, the biggest problem by the end of the century would be what people would do with all their free time. It was actually suggested that workers would have to cut back on how many hours a week they worked, or how many weeks a year they worked, or else they'd have to start retiring sooner. The truth is that the average work week is now about 47 hours, up from 43 hours 2 decades ago. That's the average. Now, some of you may be thinking, man, I wish I only worked 47 hours a week. Man, that would be great. That supports a recent Gallup poll which found that 44% of Americans consider themselves workaholics. Effectively managing our time is one of the biggest challenges to authentic manhood. Winning the fight for margin will enhance your relationships and your career. But where do you begin? To paraphrase the introduction to Chuck Swindoll's book, Living on the Ragged Edge, how do you find margin when you're in the trenches, down in the dirt of responsibility, where the grit of reality and the grind of accountability hold your feet to the fire? When you can't free yourself from the demands of competition or escape the pressure of deadlines. Forget about turning back the clock to a simpler time, Swindoll says. This is life in the 21st century. How do you find margin in life as it is? Well, let's start with a definition of what margin is. I liked Andy Stanley's definition of character. Let's use his definition of margin. It's very simple and very clear. He says this: margin is the amount available beyond what is necessary. It's the difference in what you have and what you need. The difference would be a surplus, not a deficit. Okay, margin is a surplus. If you have 30 minutes to get somewhere and it will only take you 20, then you have a surplus or margin of 10 minutes. Now, to go ahead and leave 30 minutes ahead of time, even though you know it only takes 20, would be wise and less stressful because you would be operating with a margin. Leaving only 15 minutes ahead of time would be unwise and stressful because you'd be operating with a deficit or running on empty. Let's say you have $1,000 and you have $700 worth of bills. Well, you have a margin of $300. How would that feel? What would you do with it? Margin could be having 3 or 4 nights a week where you don't have anything at all on your schedule. What would you do with that? How would that impact your family, your relationship with God? You may be thinking, that's crazy talk because that's just not reality. It could be. What if it was? Remember I said that everything we talk about in the quest is connected? Well, this is especially true when it comes to margin and our common enemy, the devil. Someone has rightly said that if Satan cannot make us really bad, he will just try to make us really, really busy. Busy doing lesser things, so we miss out on the most important things. In the Scriptures, there's the story of an encounter that Jesus had with 2 sisters, Mary and Martha. One was distracted by a lot of good things, and one created margins so she could experience the best. In Luke 10, beginning in verse 38, it says, "As Jesus and His disciples were on their way, He came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to Him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what He said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to Him and asked, 'Lord, don't You care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me.' 'Martha, Martha,' the Lord answered, 'you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her.'" The phrase, "you are worried and upset about many things," can also be translated, "you are divided and disturbed by many things." Well, that kind of cuts to the chase, I think. We are distracted, and our attention is divided between many good things. Mary was focused, and she was at rest. She had chosen the best, but Martha was divided and disturbed, distracted not by bad things, just a lot of good things that robbed her from the best. One of the scriptures we looked at in round 4 with regards to our common enemy was John 10:10. It says, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." Well, the thief will steal the margin in our lives and cover up his crime by leaving us busy with a lot of good things and killing and destroying any time for what really matters. Look at our definition of margin again and say it with me. Margin is the amount available beyond what is necessary. Let's expand on that a minute, okay? If margin is the amount available beyond what is necessary, the first thing that comes to my mind is this. Before you can determine the amount available, you must first determine what is necessary. Well, a man of character knows how to do that. He uses God's standard. What is necessary, he knows, is determined by his values. A second thought is this. We are driven by what we determine to be necessary. How we determine what is really necessary becomes highly important because whatever we put on our list is going to drive us. We decide what we want to drive us, but where is it taking us? Tim Kimmel provides keen insight into hurried homes in his book, Little House on the Freeway. In chapter 2, he gives a list of 7 marks of a hurried family. Let's see how we measured up. Okay, here's the list. He says, number 1, we're so busy we can't relax. You have conversations that go like this. Hey man, what's going on? Busier than ever. You? Me too. Busy, busy, busy. Man, I can't remember the last time I took a vacation. Me either. Now, this would be unusual. Hey man, what's going on? Not a whole lot, just enjoying the day. You? You know, the thought would be, man, that guy's a loser. He's not doing anything. There was one man who was so busy, he had a hard time disengaging when he came in the door after his typical long days at work. His 5- and 6-year-olds were naturally excited to see their daddy, but his wife could tell that he was always distracted and even seemed a little irritated by his children wanting his attention. Well, here's what she did. She was a smart woman. He would come home, and when the kids would try and get his attention, she would say, "Kids, come here. Daddy's not home yet." And they'd look at her and they'd look at him and say, "Well, sure he is, Mommy. He's right over there." Then she'd whisper to them, "We know that, but he doesn't know it yet. Go outside and play for a while. He'll be home in about 20 minutes. What she did was she created margin for him. He couldn't do it, so she did. Letter B, we're uncomfortable with quiet. That's how you know you're hurried. It's uncomfortable because it creates an environment where we can think, and thinking can lead to honest self-evaluation, and that can be scary. Letter C, we're seldom satisfied with what we have. Now, this has to do with using the wrong system to determine what we think is necessary. Letter D, we live with shifting situational standards. Do you remember that from our session on character? We are influenced by circumstances. Flimsy standards always kill character. Letter E, we're overworked and we're underappreciated. We come to accept that as the norm, and we just kind of put our head down and try and bore our way through it. After a while, that kind of environment makes you feel really old and really useless. Letter F, we worry about things we can't control. When you're hurried all the time, you try and control others to gain some kind of order, but you can't, so you just worry. And letter G, we aren't happy unless we're successful. Now, this may be hard to understand, but listen carefully. Success should never be pursued as a goal. That doesn't mean we accept failure or settle for mediocrity. I'm talking about a system that measures success by achievements and rewards, status, recognition, and dollar signs. If you accept this line of thinking, you will absolutely be denied any sense of calm and rest in your soul. The thing is, a lot of families, or just men in general, will just accept that list as the way life is, especially if it just normalizes at that level where they can exist. So they never attempt to correct it because they really don't know that it can be any different. Living life without margin is sometimes not so bad as to cause you to be alarmed. It's like living with a mild fever. You're not sick enough to stop what you're doing and go to bed, but you're not well enough to really enjoy what you're doing either. I don't think any of us really want to settle for that. So let's shift gears and talk about what we can do to identify what matters most and create the margin to enjoy it. Let's look at how we can make the most of the time. That's what the Scriptures encourage us to do in Ephesians 5. It says, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is." It says the days are evil. What does that mean? Well, the culture, the system of the world will try and force you into its mold and pull you away from what matters the most. It's a subtle shift driven by a darker, sinister force. Do you see that connection? It says the days are evil. We saw that one of the references to the devil is the evil one. The Scriptures also tell us to not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Understanding God's will is not as hard as some people make it out to be. First of all, God isn't hiding it from you. He wants you to know His will. His revealed truth and will for our lives is already in the Scriptures. His practical will becomes clear as we spend time with Him and discover what He has to say to us through the Scriptures. And then He guides us by His Holy Spirit. I want to give you some statements that I think will help us make the most of our time. First of all, most of the time, you just can't find margin, so you're going to have to fight for it. You will have to create it. It won't just be handed to you, especially if you've done well in your career. Here's what will be handed to you. You will be handed more and more responsibility, requiring more and more of your time. You will need wisdom to weigh every opportunity and honestly evaluate the implications and the impact it'll have on your life personally and on your family. Fighting for margin could mean saying no to many good things so you can say yes to the best things. In order to do that, you'll have to be secure with yourself. You won't have to say yes to feel good about who you are. You won't have to say yes so people will like you. That means you'll have to learn how to defend against the pride of life, that part of the enemy's strategy that leads you to think that you don't need anyone's help, that you're Superman and you can do anything. Fighting for margin could mean turning down a promotion if it's going to negatively impact you or your family. Now, this is where you will learn to defend against the lust of the eyes, because that's what causes you to ignore the implications because of the status and the money. All the stuff you might acquire blinds you to the impact on you or your family. Now, this isn't true for all promotions, but you'll need to ask God for wisdom to make the right choice. In Little House on the Freeway, Tim Kimmel says this. He says, "Divorce, angry kids, and failing health are not the assumed requirements for success, but they are too often the product. Company presidents may talk about the importance of the family. They may say they are committed to their employees' marriages and kids, but the actual posture of top brass is seen on promotion day, awards day, or payday. A man who doesn't want to work overtime on Saturday because his son has a Little League game is made to feel guilty. If you pass up a promotion because you said it would be too demanding on your marriage, then you are considered unambitious. Like it or not, being successful at work and being successful at home is a difficult fence to straddle. Fighting for margin could mean this. It could mean negotiating for more vacation time instead of an increase in salary. Now that's radical, okay? That's going to be a challenge because an increase in salary typically has unspoken strings attached. More pay brings with it an assumption that more time is expected and more demands can be made. Not always, but typically. You'll need to be prepared to convince your boss that the additional time off will allow you to recharge and be more productive. If you manage your time off properly, that is exactly what will happen. Fighting for margin could mean limiting the use of technology. On your day off, do you regularly check your emails and texts from work? Then do you respond to them too? How about when you're on vacation? What do you think that says to your family? If you're not married, do you ever completely unplug from technology to clear your mind and reflect on what matters the most in life? One of my bad habits, which seemed like a good idea until I realized it was keeping me from the best, was I used to use the drive time home to catch up on calls that were left over from work. Now, in my mind, I was making the most of the time. Sometimes I'd be on the phone when I pull into the garage and stay on the phone another 5 minutes or so while I finish the call. One day my little girl came out to greet me, excited to tell me something that happened in her world that day. And I kind of waved her off and said I was on an important call and would be done in a minute. She went about her way, and what I said kind of bounced around in my head. I had just communicated that my phone call was more important than her. Now maybe she didn't get that, but I sure did. So here's what I started doing. I designated a safe zone on my way home. Okay, the first one was set at the entrance to my neighborhood. That was my boundary, my safe zone. And I would tell whomever I was talking to that I had just entered the safe zone and needed to get off the phone so I could get ready to be with my family. But the problem was the distance from the entrance to my neighborhood down the street to my house didn't allow me enough time to mentally disengage. So I backed up my boundary a few blocks. Then I had to back it up about a mile. For me, the 3-mile boundary finally worked, okay? It helps me be intentional about creating margin. What would limiting technology look like for you or for your family? I suggest that you don't go home and cut the cable and throw out the TV, not unless you're prepared for a mutiny. Maybe you need to write something down in your fight plan to consider. Maybe you could start with 2 nights a week. No TV, no PlayStation, no Facebook, no Twitter, just to create margin for your family to interact. Maybe a family movie night could work if the Twitter heads and Facebook freaks put down their phones during the movie. Maybe you could start with 2 nights and then work up to 3. 4 might be too radical, but what kind of difference would it make if you created that kind of margin for you and your family? Fighting for margin could also mean learning how to be a better leader. Here's why. You may think that you are too important to take time off, that the company just couldn't make it without you. Well, I think that's a sign of poor management skills, where all the decision-making of the organization just bottlenecks with you. Trusting people on your team is good for you and it's good for them, because they will never rise to the challenge if they feel they can't do anything without you, and you will never unplug. Even when you're off, you're tethered to your email and your phone. There's a great lesson on leadership in Exodus 18. Moses had set himself up as the lone judge for all the people that he was leading, and they would stand around all day waiting to be heard. Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, called him out on this. Here's what he said in Exodus chapter 18. Why do you alone sit as judge, while all these people stand around from morning till evening? And Moses answered him, because the people come to me to seek God's will. Whenever they have a dispute, it is brought to me, and I decide between the parties and inform them of God's decrees and laws. Moses' father-in-law replied, what you are doing is not good. You and all these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. Listen now to me, and I will give some advice. Now, put yourself in Moses' sandals, okay? What's going through your mind? The pride of life kind of punches us pretty hard at times like this because none of us wants to admit we need help. Or maybe Moses was open for help because what he had been doing wasn't working. He was unraveling, and so were the people that he was leading. He not only had zero margin in his life, he was operating on a deficit. And his father-in-law lays out a business model that would empower others and bring relief to Moses and the people. It was a healthier system because it was not built on one man's personality and gifts. Moses still handled the difficult cases, but Jethro's organizational model distributed the load, and the benefits are outlined in verses 22 and 23. Look what it says. That will make your load lighter because they will share it with you. If you do this, and God so commands, you will be able to stand the strain, and all these people will go home satisfied. There it is. It's a win-win. The people were satisfied, and Moses could have margin in his life to hear from God and lead out of a surplus instead of a deficit. Fighting for margin could also mean scheduling margin, actually scheduling margin on your calendar, writing it down. Scheduling vacation time for sure, we do that typically. But I'm talking about days that you will go home early. Blocking days that you have off, not to catch up on errands, but to refresh and recharge. Actually scheduling margin on your calendar for you and margin for your family. You write it down and you block it. And if something comes up, you say no. And you don't have to give a reason. You know, sometimes we think if we decline an opportunity to do something because we've already scheduled to do nothing on that day, that we're going to look like a slacker. Well, imagine this conversation. Your boss says, I need your help with a project at work on Saturday. You say, sorry, I already have something scheduled on Saturday. Can you change it? He says. Nope, it's important. It's locked in. What is it? He asks. Nothing. I thought you said you have something scheduled on Saturday. I do. Well, what is it? Nothing. I have on my calendar a day blocked off to do nothing. Now, I may choose to do something with my family or friends, but right now it says I have nothing scheduled for Saturday. That means I have the margin I need to do something if I want to, but right now it's nothing. And you know what? It feels great to know that I have scheduled nothing on my calendar for Saturday. So I can't work this Saturday. Hey, check with Jim. I know he has nothing scheduled on his calendar, but his nothing is not the same nothing as my nothing. Hey, let's wrap this up with two more things about making the most of your time. Ephesians 5 tells us to live not as unwise but as wise. Well, we need wisdom in our fight for margin. James 1:5 says, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, and it will be given to him. Well, if God tells you to make the most of your time, He's not going to leave you hanging. He wants to give you wisdom for making right choices. So just ask Him for help. And finally, before adding anything else to your life and to your schedule, learn to ask the best question. Andy Stanley wrote a book called The Best Question Ever. And in it, he says the question to ask before you say yes to something is not, are we free that day? Because, hey, if we're free, then I guess we should do this. The question to ask is not, is this thing right or wrong? Because, hey, if it isn't wrong, then I guess it must be right, so we should do this. Andy says the best question to ask is not, is it right or wrong, or are we free? But rather, is it wise? If we are to live not as unwise but as wise, then that's the question we need to ask. Is it wise? In Craig Groeschel's series on margin, he gives a simple formula for applying this question. It's in the box on your outline. It starts with the phrase, is it wise in light of? And that's where you fill in your values or the circumstances in which a decision needs to be made. It could be, is it wise in light of what I value the most? And then be specific about that. Or is it wise in light of our current family situation? What's going on right now and how this will impact your family? Is it wise? Is it wise in light of the struggles in my marriage or our financial deficit or our emotional deficit? Is it wise? The greatest collateral damage from a life without margin is to our relationships. Relationships are what matter the most, but hurried lives suffocate intimacy. Tim Kimmel says, intimacy provides the immune system for the soul. A marginless life is filled with busyness and emptiness and soul sickness. Without margin, we're just slaves to whatever is urgent. Here's a final question. What will you do this week to fight for margin in your life?